real teams can achieve significant change. And the idea behind real teams comes from John Katzenbach, a leading thinker on teams, team management, and team development. And in this video, I want to talk about my interpretation of real teams and how it applies to project management. A real team has 3 characteristics. Firstly, everyone is highly committed to the team's shared goals, so much so that they will put aside their other agendas, their personal goals and aspirations, and indeed other goals or objectives that they've been set by their organisation. They'll work together to achieve the team goals. Secondly, real teams hold one another accountable for their performance, for their behaviours, for the way they pursue those goals. They are prepared to have the tough, the challenging conversations, to challenge one another, to do their best and to be their best. And thirdly, within a real team, leadership moves from person to person as the agenda of the team shifts from one topic to another. Different people will have different expertise, different passions, different enthusiasms, and they will step forward at the right time and lead the team, and then step back when their leadership time has finished and hand over to the next team person. If, by the way, there is a formal team leader within a real team, then that team leader will almost certainly adopt a servant leadership model, which I've talked about in another video. This means, of course, that in a real team, the formal leader may not even be evident. Their role is simply to provide the team with the resources it needs and to handle distractions that would stop the team getting on with pursuing its shared goals. Project teams are usually ad hoc. They're drawn together for the single purpose of the project, so there is a good scope for having a commitment to a shared project. However, the problem is that in drawing together a project team, they often come from different disciplines, different functions, different organisations or service lines within the wider enterprise. And that means it's very hard to avoid individual team members bringing their own agendas, their own preferences, their own ways of working. Developing a real team on a project is a challenge for this reason. And what you've got to do is to marshal them around that set of shared goals and encourage them to put aside their other affiliations. The way to do this, I think, is to show them that the project's success is more significant, more important than the narrow needs of their own function, their own service line. And that the future of their function, the future of their service line, the future of their business or division is in some way dependent upon the success of the project. This way, you align their need to respect their affiliation to their need to share and commitment to the project's goal. The second thing you need to do is to make the team a fun and engaging and a professionally rewarding place to be. A group of people that they can respect and learn from and feel a part of. This means putting a lot of effort into developing the team and building a shared culture, but also supporting and developing each team member so that they are learning and gaining something of value from their participation within that team. This means focusing on their sense of pride, on ensuring there is respect and recognition for each individual team member and giving everybody a chance to develop in the directions that suit them. And give people that chance to lead. Remember, a real team has individuals stepping forward to lead. Give them a chance to set high standards for themselves and for their colleagues and to deliver on those high standards. And finally, build a highly collaborative, highly communicative culture, one of trust and respect and a joy of working and learning together. So what have you done? But what will you do to create a real project team on your current project? Please put your answers and suggestions in the comments below, and I'll look forward to responding to all of them. In this video, I want to look at how to set a clear mission and vision for your team. What's the number one question that small children ask all the time? Yeah, it's why. Why is a search for meaning. And it doesn't stop when we become adults. It's just that we often internalize that dialogue. If people are to be committed and motivated to do some work to contribute to your project, then they have to have a good, juicy because to justify that commitment, they need a meaning for the work they're going to do. And that's what mission and vision give us. Mission and vision connect what we're doing day to day with what matters to us. I think it can be enormously valuable for a project, and certainly for any organisation, to have a mission statement and a vision statement. And I'm going to suggest to you a 5-step process for developing a mission and vision. This process will scale very nicely. It will work for a project mission and vision, or even a program or portfolio mission and vision. It will even scale to developing a mission and vision for a new organisation. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my sense of what makes for good mission and vision statements. Step 1 in setting a clear vision and mission for your team is to gather the team together. You need to set a meeting date and create a meeting for the team to get together and to discuss it. And it's really important that you prepare for this meeting. In fact, better still, find someone external to the team to facilitate the conversation and make sure they prepare well by understanding the context, by getting to know your team members and yourself, and finding out the parameters within which they're working. They will need to design a process for discussing what matters, for evaluating ideas, and for building a framework to hang the vision and mission from. The second step is to work on a start point. There are a few very simple questions that you need to ask of the team, and to really understand deeply the different answers that arise, and to start to build consensus about what aspects of those answers really matter to the team. The first questions describe what the team aspires to achieve. When you ask the team, what do you want? You're really inquiring into their sense of what their mission is. And when you ask the question, where are you going? You're really asking about their sense of vision. And the next questions deepen your understanding. Whom do you serve? Asks questions about the people we're doing the project for and who will benefit from it. And when we ask the really difficult question, why are we doing this? We're really inquiring into what the benefits are, what the value is that will accrue from the project. With this data gathering over, we need to craft some form of outline that will inspire the majority of your team. And it's important at this third stage that you are not trying to please everybody. You're not looking for some simple lowest common denominator statement that everyone can easily buy into. Now, it would be great if you can come up with a vision and a mission that everyone does endorse. But don't do that at the cost of being suitably ambitious. At this stage, you are not looking for beautifully crafted sentences or paragraphs. What you're looking for is some key phrases, some pictures even, some diagrams, some sketches, some adjectives, some nouns, some words that really capture the essence of what your vision is and what your mission is. The fourth stage is then to gain commitment to that. And remember, Here you are gaining commitment to the ideas, to the essence, not to a specific set of words. If you try to craft a mission statement or a vision statement with a large group of people, it will be messy, it will be ugly, and it probably won't succeed. You need to deputize a small group, having gained the commitment, to take away all those ideas and to come up with draft versions that they can then test with the team subsequently and further refine. And after that testing and refinement process, when you do have your vision statements and your mission statement, step 5 is to embed them. You need to communicate those statements to the whole team and to a wider stakeholder community. You need to publicize them. And you need to make them present. Repeat them so that they start to embed themselves in people's minds. Of course, you need to use them as your guiding light in the decisions that you're going to make. If they don't actually cause any consequences in the real world, then it was a complete waste of time. So what makes for good mission statements and good vision statements? Well, this is a very subjective thing, I know, but for me, the first thing is they have to be simple. They have to pass what I call the 7-year-old test. If your 7-year-old child doesn't really understand what they're talking about, then yes, smart, intelligent adults may understand it, but they won't understand it quickly. They'll have to process it and make interpretations of it. And of course, your interpretation and my interpretation may be very different. If it passes the 7-year-old test and a 7-year-old would understand what it's all about, then likely it is simple enough that we all understand it in the same way. And there's another thing I think is important about a vision statement in particular. What is a vision statement if it doesn't conjure up a vision? Craft it in ways that conjure up images, draw pictures in people's minds. Because that's what a vision is. As far as you can within this, make it short, concise, and precise. But more important than anything else, it has to be ambitious. It needs to be bold, but it also needs to be grounded in reality, particularly the mission statement. The vision can take you some way into the future and therefore perhaps not as real as the solidity of your mission. But make it bold, make it ambitious, and if everyone commits to it, or the vast majority of your team commit to it, then you've got something good. Ground rules. What are they? Does your team need them? And how do you set them and maintain them? That's what we'll look at in this video. Let's start with what are ground rules. Ground rules are the set of behaviours that we expect team members to conform with. Ground rules create a code of conduct for our team. They set out the behaviours that we expect everyone to follow. Ideally, a team will create its own set of ground rules. It is far more likely to respect them than a set of ground rules imposed by a project manager. However, there are some contexts in which certain ground rules are going to be necessary, and you may have to impose certain ground rules upon your team. Examples include things like health and safety, or in certain circumstances, elements of respect if there is a history of disrespectful behaviour. But even when you know that certain ground rules have to be respected, for example, security, if you ask the team to set their own ground rules, usually they will set perfectly appropriate ground rules. They know what's going on, and if you trust them, they will usually repay that trust. So my preferred approach is to let your team set its own ground rules, but to do your own thinking in advance so that you can fill in any gaps if they miss anything that you consider to be important. We'll look at the process in a moment. But first, why do we have ground rules? Well, it's because they set out expectations. They make people feel comfortable knowing what's expected of them and how they need to behave, and they get rid of sources of ambiguity. And of course, if you need to, with a set of ground rules, you can enforce behaviours in a way that you can't if people can quite easily say, I didn't know what was expected of me. However, if the team is familiar with one another, they've worked together before, or if they sit within an organisation with a strong shared organisational culture, then there's a good chance you won't even need to set ground rules because they will be implicit in the norms of behaviour that people already accept. In the context of project management, the team's ground rules are likely to sit within a wider document like a team charter. Team charter will of course include ground rules, but it will also include other things. Things like shared values, the processes we use for things like making decisions or sorting out conflicts, the tools that people use for specific jobs within the project, and the levels of authority that individuals have while doing their jobs. So how do we set ground rules? Well, here's the basic process that I would use. It starts with thinking through, from your point of view, what you would consider to be non-negotiable for your organisation, for your client, if that's different, and for yourself as the team leader. For me, I'm likely to include things like integrity, honesty, ethical standards, respect and fairness. Next, you need to facilitate a team conversation around ground rules. To kick off, explain what they are and why you think they're important, and the process you're going to follow. Then it's a good idea to ask your team to think about past work environments where they have valued the environment and environments that they didn't feel have worked very well, and to draw lessons from that thinking to suggest potential ground rules. Collate all of the ground rules that the team suggests and, if necessary, add your own. Next, ask your team to remove duplicates or to cluster them and come up with ground rules that summarise a set of ideas, to put them in some form of sequence, which might be a priority order or a logical order, and to tidy up some of the language. That last bit, the tidying up of the language, might happen after the team event. You might trust one individual to do that, as long as everyone's comfortable that that individual won't take liberties with the intent behind the ground rules that are expressed in the group. Once everyone agrees to the ground rules, adopt them formally and post them where people can see them. Put them on your intranet, on your project collaboration system. Put them on posters on the walls. And then, crucially, revisit them at team meetings. Maybe not at every team meeting, but regularly review how is the team performing against ground rules. Are we seeing slips in standards? And, crucially, are the ground rules still the right set of ground rules for us? Are there things we missed? Are there changes we want to make to the list? If there are, pick the right time and facilitate a new conversation to adapt the ground rules to the new context. So, what are ground rules likely to cover? Well, there are a number of things you might consider including. Some of the most important are things like timekeeping and respect for other people's time. And if you have a multinational team, possibly even how we work across time zones. Things like inclusion, tolerance and respect, how we work together as a diverse team. And then there's accountability and responsibility, both the team responsibility for what we're all doing together and individual responsibility for the component that's been allocated to me. An important one is fairness, what that means to the team and how we expect people to behave. And then there's contribution. Ground rules often set out what we expect of each individual in terms of their contribution and what we expect of the team in terms of listening to each person's contribution. You may also want to include the social aspects of the team and how the team gets on together. And critically, if appropriate, ground rules should always include a mention of confidentiality and security. Once you have ground rules, sticking to them is important. And as the project manager, and therefore as the project leader and the team leader, enforcing the ground rules is ultimately down to you. But don't worry. If you have a strong team, it will usually enforce its own ground rules. People will call out bad behaviours and corrections will happen. But if they do not happen, it is down to you. If you learn of an infraction or if you observe an infraction, you need to act swiftly and appropriately. Appropriately means a proportionate response. But if you get unacceptable behaviour and you cannot correct it, you do need to consider removing the individual from the team. Now that's extreme, but it does sometimes happen. Remember, ground rules are all about protecting the team from rogue team members, because it is the team that gets the project done. But with a good team and a good set of ground rules and a great team culture, it is unlikely that you will ever need to do more than formally refer to the ground rules again, because once people know what you expect of them and what they expect of one another, they will typically comply. Wherever you are in the world, whatever kind of project you're doing, one of the main sources of a sustainable advantage for you as a project manager and for your team delivering a project is the diversity of the team with which you're working. So in this video, I want to talk about how to support diversity and inclusion in your team. Firstly, let's clarify some terms. What do we mean by the words diversity and inclusion? By diversity, I mean welcoming people of the widest possible range of types and origins available within your society. We can think in terms of gender, or gender identity, or sexual orientation. We can think of race, of culture, of genetic heritage, and of religious preference. There's age, there's physical ability, and there's neural diversity. And if there are any I've forgotten, I apologise, and you should include those too. A truly diverse team means recognising and celebrating the differences among the people within that team. And by inclusion, I mean making it equally easy for everyone in your team to both contribute to the team and benefit from being a part of it. You need to value the differences between people and make everybody feel equally welcome and equally valued. In short, everyone needs to feel an equal part of your team, and this starts with respect. Creating a diverse team means respecting the differences, and creating an inclusive team means applying that respect to giving everybody equal opportunities to do their best work and to benefit from being part of the team. Creating a diverse team in the first place means being intentional about it. It means go looking for people who are different, who can contribute. And it means recruiting people for what they can contribute, rather than rejecting them for what they cannot. But once you've got a diverse team, creating an inclusive environment takes real effort. It may mean going out of your way to make allowances for one person, allowances that allow them to thrive and to give all of their focus and attention on doing their work, rather than being worried about their ability to fit in. Before I look at the steps you can take to create an inclusive environment, though, I want to start with the one thing that is more important than anything else. We need to acknowledge and understand the fundamental role of bias in human interactions. Bias can come about through conscious discrimination, but also through unconscious bias. The fact that our brains make decisions, make choices, make interpretations that are guided nothing more than by a set of social conventions that we have soaked up over our lifetime. And sometimes they can lead us to make choices that are unfair, unjust, and wrong. As a result, we need to acknowledge the role of unconscious and conscious bias. And we need to take steps to overcome it. Almost certainly, this means setting up processes to mean that bias is circumvented. We also need to get ourselves and our colleagues trained to recognize it and defend against bias. And we can never relax our vigilance. We need to constantly monitor our processes and our behaviors so that we can spot bias as soon as it arises and deal with it. Now, a lot of work that needs to happen to create diversity within an organization and to allow for inclusive environments needs to be done at the organizational level, but there are some essential steps that you as a project leader can take to encourage diversity and to build an inclusive environment within your project. First, get yourself some training and get training for your team members. Make sure everybody understands what this is all about and why it is valuable and how to deal with the unconscious bias that we have. There are experts in this. I'm not one of them, but those experts will teach you stuff that will allow you to get the best out of a diverse group. And if you get the best out of a diverse group, you will get so much more than you could ever get from a homogeneous group. Secondly, involve your team in setting standards, in establishing good practices, and on calling out bad behaviours. Yes, apply the principle of inclusion to how you're going to create an inclusive environment. Third, secure senior level commitment to support your commitment for diversity and inclusion. Seek out that commitment from your sponsors, from your clients, from your colleagues, from your peers. In particular, look for your project board or steering group to endorse its importance in a successful project. Fourth, adopt and adapt the very best policies, processes, procedures, systems, and behaviours from all of the organisations that have come together to form your project team. And fifth, act as a role model. Set and expect the very highest standards of respectful behaviour and encouragement of inclusion and diversity. You can support these 5 steps with a large number of practical everyday activities and choices. Firstly, you can mix up your teams and your sub-teams to deliberately create diverse work groups. You can encourage people to share their experience and to tell their stories, to encourage empathy and, more important perhaps, to make it easier for everyone in the team to support one another. You can call out and tackle disrespectful language and disrespectful behaviour quickly and effectively. And you can welcome and encourage diverse thinking and experimentation. Celebrate all that is best of your diversity. And that means celebrating everyone's contributions. If you ever do surveys of either your team or your stakeholders, then gather information that will allow you to examine and understand any systematic biases that may be going on within your project that are creating patterns that you can fix. And my final example is to make sure that you avoid generalizations and stereotyping, no matter how well-intentioned they are. Remember, the key to diversity is recognizing everyone as an individual. We are all different, even though we are all the same. There are also a large number of logistical and environmental conditions that can support diversity and an inclusive environment. Often the control of these is at the organisational level and you may have very little control over them. But what you can do is use what authority and power you have to advocate appropriately. You can advocate for equal pay and for equality of opportunity, particularly in cases where there are new projects people could be allocated to or where there are chances of promotion. You can make sure that you respect cultural and religious holidays and the need for amended working hours amongst your team, and you can advocate for that at an organisational level too. And likewise, you can advocate for facilities like prayer rooms, nursing rooms, and physical adaptations to the building and to the equipment that you and your colleagues use. You can ensure that you use gender, age, and culturally neutral language in your project documentation and advocate for that in organisational level documentation. And where appropriate, you can look to make translations of project documentation available to ensure that all of your stakeholders can properly understand it in a language that they are completely fluent in. Always think about the food and the drink that is available either within working hours or in work-based celebrations and social activities. And finally, advocate to strengthen diversity in organisational policies, processes and procedures. And as a project manager, you may want to think about having some form of diversity policy for your project. All the research shows that a diverse team working in an inclusive environment is better able to resolve problems and can create more robust decisions than any other mechanism. To me, the case for diversity and inclusion is obvious. And as a project manager, you need to know how to support diversity and inclusion on your projects. One thing, above all, can make leadership easier: an enthusiastic team. When your team just wants to roll its sleeves up and get things done, then leadership becomes simply the task of pointing them in the right direction and giving them the resources you need. But the question is, what do you do to create an enthusiastic team? Let's look at 10 things that you can do to create an enthusiastic team. Number 1, planning. It's easy to think that you have some kind of a monopoly on wisdom and foresight when it comes to planning, but you really don't. There are 3 really compelling reasons to engage your team and get them to help with the planning. And first, of course, is that together they have a greater collective wisdom than you have on your own. More heads means more brains. Secondly, involving people in the planning process is a recognition of their experience, their expertise, their judgment, and their commitment to the project. So, actually involving them is highly motivating and will generate enthusiasm in itself. And the third good reason is that once the team has created their own plan, they are more likely to be committed to it than to a plan that has been created for them. It's very easy to disown a plan when things start to go wrong and assert that you never believed in it anyway. If, on the other hand, you were part of the group that created the plan, it's very hard to say that you didn't believe in it, because the question will come back, why didn't you say so at the time? Number 2, scheduling. Far too often when we schedule people's time onto a project, we make the simple assumption of 100% availability. Now, first of all, the problem with this is that it stores up a whole load of difficult negotiations when it turns out that the person you assumed was going to be available isn't in certain circumstances. Secondly, if I am that team member and you're assuming that my availability is 100%, you're effectively saying that my other commitments have zero value.
That's going to be demoralising and it's going to sap my enthusiasm for the project. So a far better approach is to always consult each individual about their availability as you start planning. Create a simple spreadsheet or some sort of a schedule of who is available when and build your plan based on their availability. And if their time is fungible, at least you know what proportion of the total time they're going to be available for so that you don't overcommit them. That way, team members will feel confident in making a commitment to your project, knowing that you are not asking more of them than they are able to give. Number 3, progress. Progress is highly motivating, so make progress visible by displaying milestones to the project and celebrating when those milestones are achieved. Publish regular progress reports, and if your software allows it, create dashboards that allow people to see progress in real time. And of course, take every opportunity possible to celebrate success. 4th, stretching. Give your team members every opportunity to grow and develop as they work for you on your project. And there are 2 primary dimensions in which people will grow on a project. The first is skills, expertise, and knowledge. And the second is the responsibility that you give them. Both are equally important, although each will have its own priority for any given individual at any given time. The chance to develop skills and expertise leads to mastery, and this is intrinsically motivating. People recognise the impact that this can have both on their work satisfaction and on their long-term careers. And of course, responsibility is also vital as we build our careers. Not only does added responsibility grow our character and allow us to exercise our judgment, but as we rise through different layers of responsibility, we are able to demonstrate that to the people around us. Number 5, trusting. If you are going to grow somebody and stretch them by giving them more responsibility, then you need to do it completely wholeheartedly by delegating them the task and trusting them with that task. By all means, schedule opportunities to check in and get reports, and also make yourself available for support and guidance when they need it. But if you're going to get nervous about how well they're going to perform, then the time to get nervous is before you make the decision to commit and delegate to them. Discuss it with them. Once you've made that delegation and trusted them, rowing back on that not only undoes the trust you've given, but somehow it seems to make things a lot worse. If they do get into trouble, then a gentle hand. Help give them advice, but don't take over the task unless something really critical depends on it. And even then, bear in mind that most people will perform better under pressure than you really expect. Your commitment to and trust of the people in your care is a sign of the strength of your leadership. Number 6, communication. In my experience, there is nothing that stifles enthusiasm more than the feeling that I don't know what is going on, or I don't know what people expect of me, or I don't know what the future holds for me. As a result, excellent communication is a vital part of maintaining team enthusiasm. Distribute information and encourage people to communicate amongst themselves. Done well, this leads to spontaneous collaboration, to seamless conflict resolution, and to a real environment of caring among colleagues. Number 7 is environment. Maintain a productive, enthusiastic work environment by becoming like a human environmental controller. Like any control mechanism, you need to use feedback to allow you to dial up or dial down the levels of support and guidance and encouragement that you offer to your team. Feed in new resources when your team needs them, and remove contaminants and distractions that are getting in the way of your team making good progress and remaining enthusiastic about the work that they're doing. Number 8, fizzing bombs. Problems build up, but we sometimes treat them like the fizzing bombs in children's cartoons. That is to say, the bomb is fizzing, getting ready to go off, but we just stare at it, unable to act. What you need to do to keep your team enthusiastic is to show that you recognise the priority of dealing with issues at the early stages while they are small, convenient, before they blow up in your face and damage morale in a long-term and possibly irrecoverable way. Number 9 is brilliance. People want to follow leaders, and often, if there is only one option, they will follow a substandard leader, so your job is to be the brilliant leader that people really want to follow. Define your own leadership styles, approaches, methods, and templates, and choose them to create the environment and the culture that you want for your team. In doing so, be aware of the natural culture and the styles and the preferences of your team members. There is nothing more encouraging than to celebrate what people value in themselves rather than to try to overwrite it with your own value set. However, rooting the culture in a strong value set that you can buy into is vital for authenticity. Ultimately, you need to be prepared to work hard day to day to strengthen the culture and to create that long-term enthusiasm even in the toughest of times. Number 10 is endorsement. Your enthusiastic team will want to work hard for you. So what are you going to do for them in return? There's no need for expensive gifts and rewards. Their role in motivation is often overstated. What your team wants is recognition. They want you to endorse the contribution they're making, the work they've done, and the successes that they've achieved. Endorse it to them and endorse it to the wider organisation. Let people know that you are sharing their successes and triumphs openly with the whole organisation so that their success will be seen by their peers and their careers can benefit from it. Careers are important to people, but let's not forget that one thing that's even more important than that is a sense of pride in your achievement. Because of course, career progression is just one token that symbolises that we have something to be proud of. What's more important is knowing that the people around us recognise our achievements and are proud of us in return. So a simple 3-step process has always worked well for me. Number 1, make the effort to recognise when members of your team achieve something of value. Number 2, reward them. And all it needs is something as simple as praise or even just thank you. And number 3, celebrate their achievements. Celebrate the achievements of individuals within the team and of the team as a whole. And again, this does not need to be anything grand. It can be simple ceremonies set within standard team meetings. Here is the most important thing though. Don't save up all your recognition and praise and lessons learned for the end of the project or the end of a piece of work. Maintain a constant flow of recognition and endorsement and praise and learning throughout the cycle of a project and throughout any of the cycles within your project. Remember that enthusiasm will wane unless you feed it. Feed it with endorsement. Feed it with all of the other things I've suggested in this list. It's your team who deliver your project.
And if they're doing a good job, there's only one thing you can do. Say thank you. So in this video, I'm going to offer you 10 ways that you can say thank you to your team. My first way to say thank you is to say thank you. Just get them all together and say thank you. Better still, go and see each of your team members personally and on a one-to-one basis. Say thank you. And if you are all together and you've said thank you to your team, you can make that better by going around the room and saying thank you to each person individually, possibly in front of the team, identifying what you are particularly grateful for, or browse the room, making sure you speak to everyone individually. Number 2 is thank you notes. Whether it's a printed card or a sticky note, a thank you note has a huge impact. And for even more impact, print up some thank you note certificates. Number 3, handwritten letters, or at least printed letters where you've signed it by hand in an envelope, arriving by post, have a massive impact, even more than a printed card. Number 4 is small gifts. Choose your small gifts with care, something that shows your appreciation. But be sure to be even-handed. Any differences in the value of the gifts you give one person compared to another could be amplified in their perceptions. And if you do choose deliberately to give gifts of different values, make sure people will understand how that difference in value represents something meaningful in their contribution to the team. Number 5 is cakes and biscuits. Yes, provide treats for your team at tea time or coffee time. And number 6 is hospitality. Take your team out. Morning coffee, afternoon tea, lunch or dinner. Ideally, pick something that has a social value as well as just a dietary one. Number 7 is entertainment. Choose an event for your team, but make sure that it is something that everyone feels equally able to participate in, even if some people may choose not to. Number 8 is a commendation. Write a note of commendation for your team or for individual team members. And you can do this in many formats, on notice boards, in the company newsletter, or formally by placing a note of commendation on people's individual personnel records. Number 9 is a big chance, but you have to be careful with this one. Quite simply, you buy everyone a $1, £1, €1, whatever, a single lottery ticket. But the reason to be careful is that if you've got anyone in your team who has an objection to gambling, this will not be appropriate. It can also be divisive. Think about how you're going to handle it if one team member wins big. Then there are going to be a load of team members who are slightly uncomfortable with the fact that they didn't get that ticket. So it's a difficult one, it's a dangerous one, but it is an option. And finally, at number 10 is the gift of time. A fantastic way to say thank you is to give people time off, time to relax, time to do something they enjoy, time for themselves, or time to be with their families. And finally, if you can't be there to say thank you in person, then at least do it by Zoom, by Teams, by WebEx, by BlueJeans, or make a video. Thank you by email, thank you by text, pale into insignificance compared to the impact of making it personal. Teams go through cycles, and I don't just mean the regular development cycle whereby a group of people come together, become a team, and then start to perform at a high level. Even once the team is performing at a high level, there will be peaks and troughs. So what happens when your team hits a trough? When the stresses and strains of everyday work are starting to get to it. What are the things that you can do as a project leader, as a team leader, to give your team a boost? Your team is tired. I get it. You want to refresh your team. Well, here are my 10 suggestions. First, give them a break. Your team is tired, so give them a rest. Organise a break. A short break in team activities can often revitalise your team to the extent that the productivity gains after the break far outweigh the loss in working time during the break. And it doesn't have to be some expensive activity. A slap-up lunch, a picnic, some voluntary activity, anything that takes your team away from its day-to-day work will provide a break and therefore will re-energise and refresh your team when they return to work. Secondly, good news. Good news always perks people up. Ideally, you want to look for some real good news from within inside the project or the activities of the team. Look for some story of progress, of innovation, of creativity, of success, and tell that story in a way that celebrates the team's work. But another approach is to bring in some news from the outside world. Some novelty, something interesting from the internet, for example, can just give your team that little temporary boost. Third is optimism. When your team is starting to feel at something of a low ebb, then nothing beats an optimistic frame of mind from you as the team leader, because your team will take its emotional cues from you. Now, I don't mean being over-optimistic and silly confident in the face of setbacks, but what I do mean is being resourceful and looking at the future with a sense that we can overcome. Taking the lead means being optimistic in the face of setbacks by marshalling your team together, inventorying the resources, and having that can-do attitude, which will revitalise your team. For me, this is all about spotting the opportunities, and it's also about valuing the contributions of each individual. Show your team that you trust them and that you have faith in their ability to resolve whatever problems are facing you. Fourth, they do say that a problem shared is a problem halved. So act as a sounding board for your team's frustrations, concerns, worries and fears. Make sure that you give each team member the time they need to tell you what concerns them. Be a really good listener and people will value you, especially if you can be supportive and listen uncritically to their concerns. Your job here is not to rob people of their sense of agency by telling them what they should do or even what they can do, but to give them a chance to work through their problems with you sitting and listening and prompting with appropriate questions and giving appropriate support. Fifth, nothing motivates like a good bit of recognition and reward. Find ways to systematically recognise good performance, innovation, creativity and success and progress from your team members. Set up little award schemes like Team Member of the Month or Innovation of the Week, or even humorous things like Gaffe of the Week. These can all act as a prompt to getting your team together and to celebrating together. And as a prize, all you really need is a round of applause and maybe a small token gift. 6. While you're recognising and rewarding success, you must also tackle underperformance, because nothing can sap a team's morale more than feeling that some members of the team are not pulling their weight. Be proactive in assessing the performance of your team members and have quiet conversations early to head off trouble. But if you do become aware that someone is the cause of concern through their underperformance, then you can give the team a boost by acting appropriately and bringing that team member back to compliance. We all have an inbuilt sense of fairness. And when we feel that everybody is contributing fully, we feel happy with the team. Number 7 is to review your plan and your milestones frequently. A team that recognises its plan is no longer appropriate is going to be demoralised. So make sure that you take time to review the plan, review the milestones, and show that you are prepared to revise them if appropriate. This isn't about allowing all of your milestones to slip because of poor performance of your team. It's about recognizing that if your team is facing setbacks that it couldn't possibly have anticipated, you will recognize those setbacks and work hard to ensure that the team is now working to a plan that it can genuinely deliver upon. My 8th idea is to swap roles. Give people an opportunity to take one another's roles, or possibly just to shadow another team member, because doing something different is massively re-energizing. They do say that a change is as good as a break, and it also helps to create resilience in your team as new team members are able to do tasks that other team members have already mastered. Of course, it does take time to learn a new task, so swapping people too frequently can be counterproductive. But by giving people a chance to do new things and to learn new things and to develop and grow, you can re-energize your team very easily. Number 9 is to give people more authority, because the ability to work under our own direction and the ability to have more control in the workplace is motivating and energizing. And of course, if you can delegate more of your own authority, that frees up some of your time to support your team members and to think of other ways that you can enhance the team experience. And of course, as people take on more authority, they will develop and grow in themselves, not only feeling more confident, but becoming more useful team members. And finally, think about introducing new blood to the team. Maybe it's time to shake up the team with 1 or 2 fresh members to the team. These new members can introduce new ideas and contribute in different ways, and it can also put existing team members on their mettle. It can, of course, demoralize the team if you do it in a bad way, so make sure that you think it through carefully. Now, sadly, if your team has no room for growth and expansion, this might mean benching 1 or 2 experienced team members, possibly people who everyone values. But the benefit of doing that is for those 1 or 2 team members, because you're now giving them an opportunity to move on to another project and take on some new opportunities, possibly with more authority, more challenge, and therefore more growth. So if you have a team that is starting to feel a little tired, it's time to intervene. And I think with these 10 ideas, you now have plenty of ways that you can re-energize your team and give them a complete refresh. Have you ever come out of a project meeting and heard someone say, "Good meeting"? What they really mean is, it wasn't a great meeting, because it rarely is. There's a craft, a skill, an art to delivering a really great project meeting. And that's what I want to look at in this video. As project managers, as project team members, we spend a lot of time in project meetings. They are an important part of the process. And that's what makes it so critical that you do it well. You're committing a lot of resources to meetings, and run well, it can contribute massively to the effectiveness and productivity of your project team. So what are my tips for creating a really good and excellent project meeting? My first tip, as you'd expect from a project manager, is start with an objective. Know what it is that you want to achieve in your meeting. Think about the outcomes. Think about what you want to be different at the end of the meeting compared to the start. And secondly, issue an agenda. Let people know why they need to commit the time to the meeting. And at the top of that agenda, of course, state the objectives, state the outcomes that you expect to achieve. Next, invite the right people. Think carefully about who needs to be there and who doesn't. For each person you're considering inviting, ask yourself, how will the meeting be different if they are there? How will it be different if they're not there? What will they contribute? What will they gain from it? Because if the answer is not a lot, then it's not worth inviting them and using up their time when they could be doing something else important and valuable. The next thing is to make sure that you have good behaviours at the meeting, and that starts with timekeeping. And if you're running a project meeting, that means starting on time and committing to finishing on time. And if people are late and you've already started, well, that's their problem. In fact, I have a mild preference for shutting the door, maybe even locking it, as the signal that we're about to start the formal activities of the meeting. Only allow people in the meeting to use devices like phones, laptops, tablets, if they're using them either to contribute to the meeting or as a mechanism for recording their thoughts from the meeting. If someone needs to take a call, if someone needs to check their emails, then ask them to step out. It's a courtesy to the people in the room to be respectful of the conversation that's going on there. And talking about being respectful, make sure people listen attentively when other people are speaking. One person speaking at a time, no side conversations, please. And when you're in the room, be in the room. Certainly, if you're chairing the meeting, you need to be alert and attentive at all times, paying attention not just to what's being said, but to the mood of the room, looking for people who are perhaps getting confused, getting upset, getting angry, or perhaps who want to make a contribution, so that you can direct attention to the right people at the right time. And that, of course, brings me to the fact that if everyone is at the meeting for a reason, then you're going to need to hear from them, or at least give them an opportunity to speak. There are plenty of people who go to meetings and have loads of things to contribute, but don't have the confidence or the enthusiasm or the personality to push their ideas forward. Your role from the chair is to make sure those people get an opportunity to speak and get heard. And your other role, while thinking about behaviours, is to make sure that the meeting stays on topic and also doesn't kind of circle the drain going around the same issue again and again and again. So again, stay attentive for people straying off the issue, stay attentive for people repeating what's already been said, and draw a line under those. If it's a tangential issue that is not relevant to the meeting but is important, then record it so that you can come back to it and discuss it with the right people after the meeting. And if we've already said what we're saying again, then stop the meeting, summarise and move on. My next tip is to recognise the difference between, on the one hand, a project meeting and on the other hand, a project manager meeting. Because if you have a regular project meeting and you as a project manager run it, and if you need to be away from the office, if you're on holiday or if you're taking a day out to be doing something else and the meeting gets cancelled because you're not there to run it, that's not a project meeting. That's a project manager meeting. A project manager meeting is a meeting that revolves around you, the project manager. A project meeting is for the team. It's about the project. It doesn't need any one individual to be there. Not even you, not even the project manager. And my tip, in fact, is for true project meetings, rotate the person who is facilitating it so that people get used to other people chairing the meeting rather than you, the project manager. That not only makes it the team's meeting, but it makes the whole process more robust and resilient to the absence of key people. My next tip is to summarise and draw conclusions as you go, and to write those conclusions and any decisions that are made and any actions that people commit to on a board. That way everyone can see where the meeting is, what it has agreed. At the end of the meeting, point out all of the key points, reiterate them, and remind people that if they want their own personal record, they should copy what's on the board. Keep it lively. My next tip is to shake things up a bit, to transition from one discussion to another by changing the mood a bit, by doing something a little bit interesting. Perhaps show a graphic or a slide, or start the conversation with a question that engages people. If at any point during the meeting you've recorded something that came up that was tangential, was a bit of a red herring if you like, not pertinent to the discussion that you are holding, but you think it is important, then raise it at the end of the meeting and open it up for discussion. But what if you don't have time? If you don't have time, then what you need to do is to get a show of hands for who thinks that they have a contribution to make on that discussion, and facilitate those people setting up their own side meeting to pursue the issue, and volunteer to call one of them to get a report to add it to the notes of the meeting. Finally, keep your notes to the meeting simple. Issue a list of decisions, issue a list of actions grouped by person, sequenced by order of priority, which is usually the deadline to those actions. Add to that list anything that's cropped up after the meeting that people need to know about, and get it out to people as quickly as possible. And as chair and as project manager, I would say follow up on the commitments, make sure people are doing the actions they commit to do. And if anyone has been unable to attend the meeting, make a phone call, speak to them personally, let them know the important things that they missed to put the notes into context. 2 secrets to a really good meeting are prepare in advance and post-pair afterwards. That is, follow up. Because if a meeting is worth having, it's worth preparing for, and it's worth following up on. As a project manager, you want to get the best from your team. But you have so much to do and your time is limited. So you need to be focused. What is the best way to get the most your team? Put simply, good team leadership needs to focus on 4 priorities. First, the individuals within the team. Second, the purpose and the plan that the team has to achieve its objectives. Third, the team itself, the coherence, the way the team works together. And fourth, the communication within the team and the communication between the team and other stakeholders outside of it. But for my money, one of these 4 critical priorities is the most important of all. And it's the first. Because a team is made up of individuals. And if you do not cultivate your relationship with each individual in your team, then you have no leadership at all. For new project managers and team leaders, this can be a difficult priority. Setting aside the time you need for one-to-one meetings can be a challenge, and conducting those meetings well can be even harder. My simple advice is that the more you practice it, the easier it will feel, and you'll get better at it too. One-to-one meetings with each individual, whether they're a short conversation by the coffee machine or a long sit down in a meeting room, can achieve so much. They help you to learn about one another. They say, I care. They can clarify expectations, and they can assess performance, and they can give guidance. The ultimate purpose of your one-to-one meetings with team members is to help them to improve their performance in the short or the long term. So there is one question that should always figure in any meeting with any team member. What can I do to help you? No meeting is complete without a follow-up. At the end of each meeting, always summarize and close the meeting with commitments. The commitments that you make to them and the commitments you ask of your team member. And afterwards, send a short follow-up email reiterating the key points that came from the meeting and the commitments that each of you have made. If you can do that, you can make one-to-one meetings with your team members a source of substantial project management advantage. A one-on-one meeting with a project team member is the most important tool you have at your disposal as a project manager to create great performance and to get the job done. And help is at hand because we have a course, How to Lead Effective One-on-One Meetings. And if you're interested in that course, then do take a look at it, and there is a discount code in the description below. One-on-one meetings are the single best team effectiveness tool that you have at your disposal as a project manager. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video, and check out the description below for the coupon code to get our How to Conduct Effective One-on-One Meetings at a discount price. And I'll be creating loads more great project management content, so please do subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you don't miss any. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.